They say you can't put a price on transformation, but South Africa disagrees as it settled on 100 billion rand. You see, that was the size of the transformation fund that government proposed last year, a plan to pull money from the private sector and channel it into black-owned businesses. Not through a new tax, but through the BEE scorecard. Now, companies wouldn't be forced to contribute, but those who did would earn BEE points in return. So to understand why this matters, you need to understand how BEE works in practice. You see, a company's scorecard isn't symbolic. It affects access to government contracts, partnerships with large corporations, and certain licenses. And so these BEE points translate into access. Fall behind on your scorecard and you risk losing business. So the core idea behind this fund is pretty straightforward. You see, government believes that transformation is just moving too slowly and that a lot of the money is still concentrated in the same hands. And so rather than rewriting ownership laws or raising taxes, the fund tries to encourage companies to financially contribute towards transformation by rewarding participation rather than forcing it. But as expected, the pushback came pretty swiftly. You see, early drafts suggested that this fund could pull in around 20 billion rand a year from private sector contributions. But that raised obvious questions. You see, if BEE points are critical for these businesses to stay competitive, then how voluntary is this participation really? And if tens of millions of rands are flowing into this central fund every day, then who decides where it goes or how it will be spent? And so all of this backlash slowed the plans of this fund down, but it never fully went away. But now it's back. Business Day reports that government is preparing a revamped version of this fund that would significantly increase the BEE points that companies can earn by contributing a percentage of their net profits, potentially making fund payments one of the fastest ways to boost that scorecard. And so in practical terms, paying in would suddenly matter a lot more, especially for firms that rely on those points to stay competitive. And so there we have it. Same fund, same debate, but just with far more weight behind it. Now, transformation policy isn't the only pressure point this week. Our regulators are now making expensive mistakes too. If a few months from now you're wondering why the electricity bill suddenly jumped, this is probably where it started. You see, South Africa's electricity prices are set by the energy regulator NERSA, not by Eskom. And NERSA has now admitted that it's made a major mistake when deciding how much Eskom is allowed to charge customers for power. So here's the simple version. Every year, NERSA decides how much money Eskom can recover through its electricity bills. And this time, NERSA underestimated those costs by tens of billions of rands after getting the math wrong on the value of Eskom's power stations. Now, Eskom took that decision to court, and instead of defending its numbers publicly, NERSA tried to quietly settle the case. Now, the court rejected that sneaky approach and forced the issue into an open public process. So now NERSA has to fix the error, and the most straightforward way to do that is by allowing higher electricity prices. Now, that doesn't mean Eskom is suddenly more expensive to run. It means that consumers must now pay more to correct a regulatory mistake. Now, public submissions have closed and the decision is expected soon. The question is whether South Africans end up paying higher bills, not because the power costs more to produce, but because the regulator couldn't do the math. So regulatory failure is one kind of pressure, but trade-offs between price and jobs, well, that's another. South Africa is considering anti-dumping duties on cars imported from China and India, even though both countries are meant to be close trading partners. Now, that alone signals how much strain our local auto industry is under. So at the heart of this is dumping. In simple terms, dumping happens when cars arrive in South Africa at prices so low that they undercut local manufacturers. But once these anti-dumping duties are applied, those price advantages are largely neutralized because the cars land here far more expensive than before. So that's the point of this system. Anti-dumping duties aren't meant to block imports. They're meant to cancel out these artificially low pricing before it leads to factory closures and permanent job losses across the local supply chain. And you'll see, once those duties kick in, the knock-on effects are unavoidable. Imported cars become pricier, margins shift, and the competitive landscape changes almost overnight. So this isn't just about trade defense, it's about what kind of car market South Africa ends up with. one where consumers benefit from price cuts, at least in the short term, or one where the country still has a functioning auto manufacturing base a decade from now. You see, the tariffs don't make that choice for us, but they are designed to stop that decision being made by default. And before we cruise on to our Bagel Bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, somewhat following on from the previous story, South Africa's auto component sector has taken a beating, with 13 factories shutting down over the past 3 years and 4,400 jobs lost, as governments weigh up high import tariffs, tax tweaks, and incentives to push car makers towards local suppliers. Bank of America data shows that South Africa now has the largest institutional investor base in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, with assets topping $1 trillion, more than 230% of our GDP. And tourism has officially bounced back, with South Africa welcoming a record 10.48 million international visitors in 2025, up nearly 18% year on year, supporting 1.8 million jobs and pushing arrivals beyond pre-pandemic levels. We'll cover this in more detail in tomorrow's show. And just a quick side note, if you're enjoying the show, please can I ask that you like and subscribe. It goes a long way. Furthermore, if you haven't done so already, please be sure to join our WhatsApp channel where we will send you a daily message with the link to today's show, so you never miss it. The link to that is either in our description below or our bio. Get involved. And on to our Bagel Bite of the day. Let's see what you got. The question is, which punctuation mark is also known as a virgule? Is it A, slash, B, hyphen, or C, colon? We'll give you the answer at the end of the show. South Africa doesn't feel like an Olympic powerhouse, but the medal table tells an interesting story when you zoom out. You see, South Africa's medal count always looks kinda underwhelming at first glance, and on the raw table, it pretty much is. Across all Olympic Games throughout history, South Africa has won 95 medals, which puts us at around 37th globally, well behind countries like the US, China, and Russia, but also behind much smaller European nations with deep Olympic funding systems. So part of that gap comes from history. You see, South Africa missed multiple Olympic Games during the apartheid era ban, losing entire medal cycles while other countries kept building depth. That absence shows up in today's totals: fewer appearances, fewer chances, fewer medals. But history isn't the full explanation. You see, South Africa has never won a single Winter Olympic medal, largely because we don't have the climate or the infrastructure to compete seriously in winter sports. Add to that the absence of a heavily funded local Olympic system, and ranking 37th globally starts to look less like underperformance and more like a reflection of what we've achieved despite those limits. And as for that Bagel Bite, the answer is the slash. Virgule comes from the Latin virgula, meaning little rod, a term originally used for small marks in early manuscripts, which later became the name for the slash. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in, and be sure to join our WhatsApp channel if you haven't done so already. Hope you guys have a great day further. Be kind to one another, and we'll catch you all tomorrow for the next round of the good stuff. God bless.